Imagine vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only whispers in the wind and a single mysterious word etched into a tree, CROATOAN. Before we dive into this mysterious story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more chilling tales like this. The year was 1587. Brave settlers from England arrived on Roanoke Island, seeking new beginnings. The island was beautiful, yet mysterious. Its forests were thick, its rivers sparkling, but something in the shadows felt alive. Captain John White warned the settlers, "We will not jump to conclusions. No one goes into the forest alone until we understand this." But deep in the forest, whispers echoed, shadows moved, and strange symbols appeared, all carved with a single word, CROATOAN. Days turned into weeks. The forest seemed to change around them. Paths twisted, streams shifted, and every night brought eerie voices and figures cloaked in mist. By the end, the settlers had vanished entirely. No trace, no struggle, only the haunting word, CROATOAN. The forest had kept its secret, and the mystery lived on for centuries. Warm and friendly tone, medium slow and fast. Each day brought new mysteries. Items would dissip the cold, salty air of the Atlantic Ocean bit at their cheeks as the tiny fleet of ships approached the shores of Roanoke Island. Waves crashed against the hulls with relentless force, sending sprays of icy water across the decks. Captain John White stood at the bow, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar coastline. Behind him, families clung to one another, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. "This is it," White murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "A new beginning, but the unknown lies ahead." The settlers were a mixture of men, women, and children, their hands calloused from labor, their minds hardened by the challenges of a changing world. They had left England with dreams of prosperity, freedom, and opportunity, but none truly knew the dangers that awaited them in this untamed land. The first few days were cautiously optimistic. They set up shelters, built crude fences, and began the laborious process of securing food. The island was beautiful, its forests thick and green, its rivers sparkling under the sun. Yet there was an air of unease. Strange sounds echoed from the woods, whispers in the wind, rustling that seemed too deliberate to be merely the trees, and shadows that moved in ways no human should. Young Thomas Raleigh was the first to notice the odd markings on a tree at the edge of the forest. Etched deep into its bark was a single word, CROATOAN. He pointed, his finger trembling. "Captain, look!" The group hurried forward. Murmurs rippled through the settlers. "What does it mean? Is it a warning? A message?" Captain White studied the carving carefully. "Patience," he said finally. "We will not jump to conclusions. This may be the work of the locals or something else entirely. No one goes into the forest alone until we understand what this means." Even as he spoke, a chill ran down his spine. The island seemed alive, watching them, waiting. There was an unspoken tension in the air, an awareness that they were not entirely alone. Night fell quickly. Fires were lit, the glow casting long, flickering shadows across the camp. The families huddled close, listening to the crackle of flames and the distant howl of an unknown animal. Thomas could not sleep. He swore he saw a figure among the trees, tall and silent, vanishing whenever he blinked. Days passed, and the word CROATOAN appeared again and again, in unusual places, carved into another tree, etched faintly into the sand, even traced on a rock by the riverbank. Each sighting left the settlers more anxious, yet curiosity overcame fear. A small party of men, armed with swords and rudimentary muskets, volunteered to investigate the forest. Captain White hesitated, but knew they had to understand the island's secrets if they were to survive. As the party ventured deeper into the woods, the canopy thickened. Sunlight barely penetrated the branches above. The air was heavy with the sense of damp earth and wildflowers, yet something else lingered, something undefinable, ancient, and watchful. A sudden rustling made them freeze. "Who's there?" called Thomas, his voice barely above a whisper. Only the wind answered, but it carried a whisper of voices, soft and fleeting, like echoes of the past. They found strange symbols on rocks and trees, markings that suggested someone, or something else, had been here long before them. Captain White traced them with his finger, a shiver running down his spine. "These are not natural," he said. "Someone left these, or something else left them." Hours turned to days as the settlers explored, each discovery more unsettling than the last. The forest seemed to shift around them, familiar paths vanishing, replaced by unfamiliar clearings and pools. Shadows moved in the corner of their eyes, always just out of reach, always silent. By the end of the first week, the settlers returned to camp with unease etched on their faces. They had not found answers, only more questions. And always, the word CROATOAN haunted their thoughts, a riddle carved into the very fabric of the land. Little did they know, this was only the beginning. The island held secrets far deeper than anyone could imagine, secrets that would challenge their understanding of reality, their courage, and ultimately, their very existence. The forest had become an entity of its own. Every day the settlers discovered something new, signs, symbols, faint footprints that disappeared into thin air, and sometimes the distant sound of voices that seemed to echo from nowhere. Fear and curiosity battled within each heart. Captain John White called for a meeting at dawn. The settlers gathered, weary and anxious, the morning mist clinging to their clothes. "We cannot remain idle." Whitney began, his voice firm but laced with concern. "We must explore, carefully, but we must understand this land if we are to survive. Some among you will accompany me into the forest. We move in groups, and we do not stray. Are you ready?" The men and a few courageous women nodded, though their faces betrayed unease. Weapons were checked, provisions packed, and the search party moved into the shadows of towering trees. As they delved deeper, the forest closed around them. Sunlight barely penetrated the canopy above. The air was heavy with the sense of damp earth and wildflowers, yet something else lingered, something undefinable, ancient, and watchful. A sudden rustling made them freeze. "Who's there?" called Thomas, his voice barely above a whisper. Only the wind answered, but it carried a whisper of voices, soft and fleeting, like echoes of the past. They found strange symbols on rocks and trees, markings that suggested someone, or something else, had been here long before them. Captain White traced them with his finger, a shiver running down his spine. "These are not natural," he said. "Someone left these, or something else left them." Hours turned to days as the settlers explored, each discovery more unsettling than the last. The forest seemed to shift around them, familiar paths vanishing, replaced by unfamiliar clearings and pools. Shadows moved in the corner of their eyes, always just out of reach, always silent. By the end of the first week, the settlers returned to camp with unease etched on their faces. They had not found answers, only more questions. And always, the word CROATOAN haunted their thoughts, a riddle carved into the very fabric of the land. Little did they know, this was only the beginning. The island held secrets far deeper than anyone could imagine, secrets that would challenge their understanding of reality, their courage, and ultimately, their very existence. They continued, hearts pounding, senses straining for any sign of life. That's when they discovered a series of symbols etched into stones around a clearing. The symbols twisted and curved in patterns that seemed almost alive, shifting subtly when no one was looking directly at them. At the center was the word CROATOAN, larger and deeper than any they had seen before. "This is unnatural," whispered one of the men. "These markings, they're not random." White knelt, tracing the carvings with his fingers.
"They are a map," he said slowly, "or a warning, possibly both." As night fell, the group decided to camp in the clearing. Fires were lit, but shadows stretched far beyond the flames. Strange sounds echoed in the dark. Soft footsteps, rustling, whispers that seemed to call their names. Sleep came fitfully, and dreams were filled with visions of figures cloaked in mist, watching silently. In the morning, the woman who had vanished was gone without a trace. Her absence became the grim reality they could no longer ignore. The forest was not a passive place. Peer from camp, only to be found later in impossible locations. Paths they thought familiar twisted and merged, leaving them lost despite their efforts to map the terrain. And always, the word CROATOAN appeared, sometimes etched into trees, sometimes appearing faintly in sand, always present, always a haunting reminder that the forest had a mind of its own. Captain White's resolve hardened. Whatever is guiding us, we must understand it. We cannot simply wait for fate to claim us. We search, we learn, we endure. Yet, in the depths of their minds, the settlers began to realize the truth. They were not merely exploring the forest was exploring them. By the end of the third week, the search had revealed more questions than answers. They had glimpsed shadowy figures between the trees, heard voices that no human could make, and seen symbols that seemed to move when not looked at directly at. At the center was the word CROATOAN, larger and deeper than any they had seen before. It was no longer a puzzle. It was a warning, and the forest had only just begun to show its hand. The settlers had begun to understand that Roanoke Island was not merely land to be claimed. It was a living enigma, older and stranger than any of them had imagined. Every tree, every shadow, every rustling of leaves seemed to carry messages from a past long forgotten. Captain John White gathered the group near the largest tree in the clearing. Its trunk was thick, gnarled, and etched with countless symbols. Among them, the word CROATOAN stood boldly, as though insisting they notice it. "We are treading upon history older than ourselves," White said, "and history sometimes speaks in ways that are unsettling." The settlers listened in silence. Among them, Thomas Raleigh shivered. "Captain, the forest, it feels like it's trying to tell us something. I see shadows moving in patterns, almost like watching us." White nodded. "It is not the first time humans have misunderstood this place. We must respect it, or it will consume us." Later that day, an elder among the settlers, Mary Aldridge, shared a story she had heard long ago. "Legends speak of a people who lived here before anyone arrived from England. They were said to understand the language of the forest, to move with it, and sometimes vanish into it, leaving only signs behind." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Could it be that CROATOAN was not a name, but a warning, or perhaps a guide? That night, as fires burned low, Thomas awoke to whispers drifting on the wind. At first he thought it was the trees creaking, the river flowing, but then he recognized words. "Follow, follow, seek the truth, or vanish." He woke Captain White immediately. "Sir, the forest speaks. I hear voices calling to me." White's eyes narrowed. He had heard similar rumors among the settlers. "Voices or illusions, Thomas, we cannot yet tell, but the forest is old. It remembers, it tests, and we are outsiders in its memory." The next morning, the settlers discovered more carvings deeper within the forest. Symbols interwoven with CROATOAN, some depicting strange figures, others resembling maps or directions. Each symbol seemed to pulse with an unspoken energy, as if alive. White studied them with careful attention. These are messages from those who came before, or perhaps from the forest itself. Either way, it is not idle. It expects something of us. A small team was sent to follow the symbols further into the forest. As they progressed, the trees thickened, their branches intertwining to form tunnels of shadow. The air grew colder, heavier, and thick with the scent of damp earth. At one point, the team stumbled upon a stone circle, ancient and overgrown. In the center lay an engraving that sent chills through their spines. A series of human figures dissolving into mist, with the word CROATOAN beneath. Silence fell. The realization was clear. People had disappeared here before, not by chance, not by sickness, but by something far older, far stranger. Returning to camp, the settlers were shaken. They shared stories of glimpses of shadowy figures, whispered voices, and the forest's uncanny movement. The word CROATOAN was no longer a puzzle. It was a reminder, a warning from the past that the forest did not forget and it did not forgive. Captain White finally spoke. "We are explorers, yes, but we are also guests here. We must learn, respect, and survive. The past is whispering, and if we do not listen carefully, we may vanish as those before us did." As night descended once more, the wind carried the whispers, this time in unmistakably calling names. Every settler clutched their blankets, fear and wonder intermingling. They had learned that the past was alive, and the forest's memory was not to be taken lightly. The whispers of the past had begun to guide, challenge, and haunt them, and the colony had no choice but to follow. The forest had become more than just a backdrop for the settlers. It was a puzzle, a labyrinth of shadows and symbols that seemed to twist and change as they moved through it. Every day, Captain White and his party discovered more markings, more carvings, more hints that the land itself had a memory, a will, and perhaps even an intelligence. "This isn't just a place," Thomas Raleigh whispered, tracing the edge of a deep carving. It's alive, watching us, testing us." White nodded, though his jaw was tight with concern. "I fear you may be right, Thomas. We have trespassed into something far older than our comprehension. But we must continue. We must understand what forces we are dealing with." That morning, a small team ventured deeper than ever before, following a trail of CROATOAN carvings etched into stone, trees, and even the muddy banks of a winding creek. The forest grew denser, the light dimmed to a perpetual twilight. The air felt heavy, electric, as though charged with the presence of something unseen. Soon they came upon a hidden clearing. At its center stood a massive stone altar, covered in moss and strange symbols. Circling it were carvings of human figures, some holding hands, some dissolving into mist, eerily similar to those they had seen before. And again, etched prominently at the base, CROATOAN. "This is more than a warning," muttered one of the men. "These markings, they're a record, a history, and maybe instructions." White approached the altar carefully, running his fingers over the carvings. The symbol seemed to almost pulse with his touch, faint vibrations that sent chills up his spine. "These are messages from those who came before," he said quietly, "or perhaps from the forest itself. Either way, it is not idle. It expects something of us." The team lingered, examining the stone, but every second they stayed felt like time stretching unnaturally. Shadows moved just beyond sight, and every rustling of leaves carried the echo of whispers, names, warnings, urgent calls to continue or retreat. As night fell, they made camp at the edge of the clearing. Fires were lit, but the darkness beyond seemed almost impenetrable. Every crackle of the fire seemed to echo with unseen whispers. Shadows flickered between the trees, and every settler's heart raced with terror and anticipation. In the early hours of the morning, White awoke to silence once more. The remaining settlers were gone. Tents were empty, food untouched, fires cold.